From the KCRA Election Center, this is Decision 98 with Dave Walker and Lois Hart. The Channel 3 news crew stationed around the state, bringing you live up-to-the-minute election returns, plus the voices of California, political experts Steve Swat and Kevin Riggs, and unique perspectives. Tonight, the issues, the decisions, and the results as Channel 3 reports Decision 98. Now, Dave Walker and Lois Hart.
And our election coverage is continuing. California's June primary. We welcome those watching on C-SPAN and Prime Star, as well as our viewers on Q58. And we'll be here with you throughout the night with the very latest elections on the state, county, and local races, of course.
We have our news crews, as you know, standing by throughout the state of California to bring the latest on the results as they come in for you, and of course get campaign reaction for you. And we also, as you know, we've already, the AP has announced that Dan Lundgren has captured the nomination, GOP nomination for governor of California. And Gray Davis, it is a huge night for him, near a landslide victory. He has captured the Democratic nomination for governor of California. So we know now it is Davis versus Lundgren for the governor of California.
Yeah, yet to hear from Davis or Checky for that matter. Steve Swat is our political expert for the evening, and it's a very important race, this governor's race, for a lot of reasons, Steve, isn't it?
It is important for a lot of reasons because, first of all, whoever becomes California's next governor automatically becomes a major player on the national scene, whether he likes it or not. And quite often the California governors are asked to take the pledge not to run for president. So far, Dan Lundgren has really not answered that, and Gray Davis has indicated that he would serve out a full 4-year term should he be elected. But if you go back to a couple of recent governors, Ronald Reagan and Jerry Brown, they certainly ran for governor really as soon as they were sworn in. Ronald Reagan was sworn into office in early 1967, and he made an aborted attempt against Richard Nixon at the Republican convention in 1968 in Miami Beach. And then he ran for president again in 1976. And of course in 1980 he won. Jerry Brown wins in 1974 for governorship, and he's immediately running for president. He enters some late primaries in 1976, then runs again in 1980 and then 1992, and now is talking like he might even run for president again, using the Oakland mayorship perhaps as a stepping stone. But the Gray Davis victory tonight is overwhelming. You can see from the map that so far, of all of the states that are reporting significant vote totals, Gray Davis has won all of them. He is winning in the Democratic primary alone, 61% of the vote in San Francisco, 56% in vote-rich Los Angeles, 47% in San Diego, Santa Clara with 57%, Sacramento with 64% of the vote in the Democratic primary, which is very significant given the fact that he had two very well-heeled and very energetic opponents in Al Checky and Jane Harman. Speaking of Al Checky, historians will focus an entire chapter on the Checky collapse. Here, as you see, he is carrying not a single of California's 58 counties, and we must expect the inevitable jokes now that his consultants with $35 million to play with should be sued for political malpractice. Here's a guy worth $750 million, an unlimited bank account. The cost of a campaign for him is like taking a few friends to a nice restaurant for dinner. The day after the Academy Awards, when everyone was making a big deal about the few $100,000 in ads that Checky bought during his broadcast, his net worth increased a cool $13 million when his 11 million shares of Northwest Airlines stock went up more than 1 3/16. He had enough money to saturate TV, enough money to hit 3 million voters with absentee campaigns, enough money to hire 30 policy experts and consultants drafting a ream of poll-driven position papers. Jane Harman simply failed to galvanize women to her candidacy as Dianne Feinstein did in 1990 and Kathleen Brown did in 1994. Women comprise 56 to 58% of the Democratic voters, and here you see that she is carrying not a single county. In 1990, Feinstein received 55% of the female vote. 4 years later, Brown received 51% of the female vote. If Harman had numbers like that, she'd probably win. Now, a few months ago, the pundits were exclaiming that you had to be a zillionaire to win statewide office in California. The landscape, of course, is littered with rich failures seen as ambitious millionaires billionaires who don't understand the lives of ordinary citizens. 2 statewide elections in a row where money could not buy happiness. Michael Huffington spent $29 million of his own money against Dianne Feinstein 4 years ago and lost. This year, Al Checky is spending $35, perhaps $40 million of his own money against Gray Davis and is losing, has lost. And Darrell Issa so far has spent $8.5 million of his own money in the Senate campaign against Matt Fong. And the late numbers that I've just received shows that Darrell Issa is losing by 5 percentage points to Matt Fong in that important U.S. Senate nomination race to see who will square off against Barbara Boxer in November. Matt Fong is carrying the coastal areas of California, Los Angeles County, and Northern California. Issa is carrying most of Southern California, especially San Diego, his home base, but he is not carrying Los Angeles County. He is carrying the Sacramento Valley. Back to you.
I guess, Steve, one thing stands out here. This election, anyway, this time, seems to prove the experts are fallible, that money can't buy an election.
And not only that, most of the experts were trying to say, and Lisa, this is how Proposition 198, the open primary, was sold to everybody a couple years ago when it was on the ballot. Most of the experts were saying when you have an open or blanket primary, you would attract moderate voters because the Democrats would try to go after Republicans, Republicans would try to go after Democrats and the independents. Look who you have running for governor of California this fall. You have, you know, as Dan Lundgren said in a speech a few minutes ago, you've got a conservative Republican against a liberal Democrat.
Yeah, the voters proved the experts wrong. Steve Swat, thank you.
Just moments ago, the Republican nominee for Governor Dan Lundgren spoke before Party Faithful in Los Angeles. He thanked those who helped him get nominated and had some words for his competitor, Dennis Perrone.
I just finished talking to my opponent, Dennis Perrone, in San Francisco, and I think he was trying to concede, but he said something to the words about party on, dude, so I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Dan Lundgren beginning his victory announcement tonight on a very humorous note. I guess that's the most animated I've seen him recently in his campaign appearances.
Well, he
has
good
reason to be.
Yeah. Kurt Pringle has been apparently nominated for treasurer, as you see, with 11% of the precincts reporting. He's got a solid lead over his opponent, 72% to 28%. And one note before we go on here, Tuolumne County tells us that they've gotten their numbers kind of botched up, so we can't vouch for the accuracy of Tuolumne County, but we're hoping to get that straightened out.
Yeah, they said they messed it up. As soon as they get it straight, we'll have those numbers for you appearing on the bottom of the screen tonight. Walt Gray is running all over Sacramento tonight, checking on the people and what they think about tonight's primary election, and particularly, I guess, Walt, on propositions and all this information. A lot of people sensing, what, overload?
Well, Dave, I was going to ask you and Lois this. I'm assuming that at home at your place, the Walker Hart residence, you were getting a lot of mailings, etc. But there was a first for me at work this week. 3 voicemail messages at work saying vote for this person and vote for this proposition. So it seems like it's been a bit more than usual. It has been a bit of sensory overload, and whether it be a candidate or a proposition in this primary, the last few days certainly has seen a bombardment of mailings, phone calls, and signs designed to get you over to their side. Is there just so much information out there that you're on overload? This campaign sign parade at I-5 and Pocket Road probably didn't sway too many undecideds, especially if you're driving by quickly. And with 8 propositions on the ballot and the first ever open primary for governor, what did you do? Hopefully, it was homework.
You have to do your homework. And of course, there are a lot of ads and flyers that come to my home that I can read and do some research.
And for the first time I recall in voting, I had a spoiled ballot and had to ask for a new one.
Because it was just almost too much.
That is correct. That is correct.
A first time for you.
That's my first time I ever recall ruining a ballot.
To some degree, I kind of would agree that it is a little bit of an overkill, to the point where when you overkill, you simply don't do your homework sometimes because you believe the overkill.
There were a lot of propositions to vote on. I was confused, so I didn't vote on everything. I voted on only the ones that I felt comfortable with.
Now, I'd never heard of a spoiled ballot before, but apparently if you screw it up and you ask someone who's attending, they will give you a new one. In one case, a gentleman wanted to vote yes on Measure 221 and punch 221, but to vote yes on Measure 221, you have to punch 237. So therefore, it's a spoiled ballot. Cry uncle, somebody will assist you. Dave and Lois, back to you.
I'm glad to know that.
Mike Boyd is following the sheriff's race tonight. He is reporting live right now in Marysville. Mike, can you hear us? Are you with us?
Oh.
I'm Mike Boyd in Yuba County, where we'll be back in just a moment with the latest on the sheriff's race. And let's bring it to you. We have the gloves off tonight in Yuba County. The candidates are squaring off, and we have a sheriff incumbent who has never been challenged for office, and a challenger who is fiery and debated for the last year. Here's the latest. Tyndall versus Black. The Yuba County Sheriff's race is too close to call, even though the voter turnout has been well under 50%. 10 to 12,000 total votes are expected in a campaign where the candidates have spent more than $80,000. Both candidates held so-called victory parties tonight, but with contrasting atmospheres. At the gathering of incumbent Sheriff Gary Tyndall, we were told the party was private, the media was not welcome, and to please leave. We did.
We're not going to do anything right now. I'll ask you to shut your camera off if you don't have any comments.
We were welcomed at the gathering for Sheriff's challenger Virginia Black across town. She has spent a year in a race debating Tyndall at every turn on issues like morale and drug enforcement.
After all that, and I would do it again in a heartbeat, I've run a very good campaign with the help of all these supporters here tonight. We've addressed issues, we've stuck on our issues and stayed focused on what we want to do here, and I think the voters in this county are going to respond to that.
And the latest we have, as we are in Black headquarters in Marysville, it's a very close race, about 53% to 47%, and it's very early in this long night of counting. Back to you.
All right, Mike, thanks. That is a tight race out there in Yuba County, and as I understand it, she would be the first elected female sheriff in the state. Well, we lost Mike, but that's the truth. She would be if she wins, Virginia Black, she would be the first elected female sheriff in the state.
And in Los Angeles laws, we understand that Gray Davis is, there he is. He has proceeded to the podium. He has, at last count, nearly 60% of the vote. He has been nominated as the Democratic nominee for governor here in California. Thank you. 16% of the votes counted. He has nearly 500,000 votes at this point.
We've already heard from Dan Lundgren, the Republican nominee, and Jane Harmon, another Democratic nominee, and we've yet to hear from Al Checky.
Ray Davis about to announce. Well, let's listen in.
Thank you. 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 Thank you, my friends. I want to thank every single person on this stage. They've all been phenomenal to me in this campaign, but none stands taller than the mayor of San Francisco. When I started up in San Francisco, I had one person for me. Other people had 10 or 15, so I thought that was a fair fight. I had Willie Brown on my side. Thank you, Willie Brown. I'm going to acknowledge everybody before the night is over, but I want to make a few remarks. First, let me just introduce 4 people in my family. My wife, Sharon, the love of my life, who's been with me every step of the way. My mother, Doris Morell, who flew out here tonight, and tonight is her birthday. Thank you for giving her a great present. My sister, Dee Dee Ross, who also came across the country to be with you tonight. Thank you, Dee Dee. And my father-in-law, Don Ryer, whose birthday was last night. So thank you for coming. And just one more introduction now. The person I started my political career with, the great mayor of Los Angeles, Tom Bradley. Give me water, honey. My friends, this is truly an experience money can't buy. Let me say to the people of California, on this, the first open primary in our history, the name open primary is really fitting because you've opened your hearts and opened your minds to me, and I will be eternally grateful. Tonight, for the first time, a Democratic nominee for governor can proudly claim he would not be standing here tonight without support from Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike. And Californians, today, you defied the experts, you proved the pundits wrong, and you know what? I think we're going to win again in November. I want to thank my two very worthy opponents in this race, Al Checkey and Jane Harmon, for calling me and pledging their support in the general election. I want to thank the President of the United States, Bill Clinton, for calling and pledging his support in the general election. And I want to tell my two very worthy opponents, they have very good ideas on how to improve this state. I look forward to working with them in the general election and beyond to make this a better state for every single Californian. Thank you. I also want to congratulate my general election opponent, Dan Lundgren, on his victory tonight. Now the voters will have a very clear choice in November. And there will be many occasions between now and then when we can share our competing visions. But for now, let me tell you where I stand. As governor, my top priority will be to fix the schools, and I believe in a high achievement, high expectation approach to learning. I strongly support the death penalty, and as governor, I will take a back seat to no one in my determination to keep our schools, streets, and neighborhoods safe from drugs, violence, and crime. And as a former state controller, I fully understand the need for a growing economy to offer jobs and opportunities to all of our citizens so they can realize the American dream. And I will work hard to do just that. As governor, I will fight to protect a woman's right to choose. I will protect our children by standing up to the tobacco industry. I'll defend our environment, and I will oppose offshore drilling. And I'll put an end once and for all. I'll put an end once and for all to the divisive wedge issues that have marred our recent past and pitted one Californian against another. That is coming to an end. Finally, my friends, the time has come to put an end to 16 years of stagnation and to once again fulfill our destiny. Because we in California have always been a people called to greatness. And it's time for us to move again, time for us to grow again, and time to aspire to do great things again. Despite this big victory, we will be tested time and time again. But the causes we pursue are right, and with your help, we will prevail in November. In closing, let me thank all the people that made this possible tonight. First, to the rank and file peace officers and classroom teachers, members of the clergy, environmentalists, business leaders, and working men and women across this state. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. To the million-plus voters who entrusted me with the nomination and the chance to lead the greatest state in the greatest nation on earth, thank you very much. As you can tell, running against someone who has all this money is very wearing on your voice, so I think I'm going to make it, though. I think I'm going to make it. To my volunteers and very dedicated campaign staff, there is no way I could have done this without your remarkable help, and from the bottom of my heart, I thank each and every one of you. And most of all, to my wife, Sharon. This woman is unbelievable. I want to quote the words of that famous philosopher, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. God only knows what I'd be without you, sweetie. And finally, for all of you who put your trust in me, I'll make you this one pledge. As governor, I will work every day to do what is right for you and what is right for California. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
Gray Davis announcing his thanks to his wife, his supporters, his family, and of course the estimated 1 million voters who voted for him here in California tonight when the final tallies are in. And what's astonishing, I suppose, about his stunning victory is tonight that although Dan Lungman was essentially unopposed, Gray Davis garnered nearly as many votes in this primary vote tonight for governor as Dan Lundgren did.
Quite a stunning victory for Gray Davis. He was greatly outspent, of course, by Al Checky and Jane Harman. As you can see, he beat each of them about 2-1.
Now, Lillian Ken is covering the Sacramento County Sheriff's race for us tonight. She is with Lou Blanes, I believe, who had the commanding lead, I believe, at last report. Lillian, what's the latest?
That's right, Dave and Lois. We have a very happy crowd here tonight. It's no surprise to understand why. Undersheriff Lou Blanes is way ahead in this race so far. Here are the latest numbers. These include absentee ballots and 10% of the precincts reporting. So far, Blanes has 62.7% of the votes. A distant second is Isleton Police Chief with 17% of the votes. Joining us now is Lou Blanes. And thank you for joining us. This is key for you because in order to avoid a runoff election in November, you have to receive more than 50% of the votes, and it appears that you're on track of doing just that.
Yeah, that's correct. I have to get 50%. Right now, we've only got 7% of the precincts reporting, and we're at 63% right now. We've still got a couple hours to go before we really can declare where anybody stands. I really believe that.
But it's a very good sign, to say the least.
It's a great sign. It shows that a lot of my volunteers work very hard. We had phone banks, we walked precincts, we had great TV ads. We worked very hard to get where we're at right now.
You were considered to be the clear frontrunner from the very beginning. You had all the major endorsements, District Attorney Jan Scully's endorsement, Sheriff Glenn Craig, the Deputy Sheriff's Association. How important was it to get those key endorsements?
Well, I think it was the most important factor of the whole race. You got the Sheriff, Glenn Craig, the District Attorney, Jan Scully, and then to get the rank and file deputy, the people that work for you. Overwhelmingly, they endorsed me to be the next sheriff. And the Sacramento Police Officers Association, California Highway Patrolmen's Association, California Correctional Peace Officers Association, real good, strong organizations, and their support meant a lot to me in this campaign.
During your whole campaign, you emphasized that in Sacramento County there's what you called misdemeanor anarchy. What do you mean by that, and how do you plan to fix that if elected sheriff?
Well, what I've meant is that we have 67,000 warrants in the system, misdemeanor warrants, that are going unserved because there's no room in the jail. And our proposal is to double bunk some of the cells in the main jail and start booking some of these misdemeanors, because I really believe that misdemeanor crime leads to more violent crime. If you look at what's occurred in San Diego and New York, violent crime has reduced dramatically since they started a zero-tolerance program and going after misdemeanor criminals.
All right, Under Sheriff Lou Blanes, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much.
And that is the latest from Blanes headquarters. I'm Lillian Kim reporting live in Natomas. Dave and Lois, back to you.
All right, thanks, Lillian. And another familiar face around Sacramento, not for a while, but of course, Jerry Brown, and he looks on his way to be the Oakland mayor. Here's Tim Herrera.
That's right, Lois. Jerry Brown is back. He spent 2 terms as California's governor. He ran for the presidency 3 times. He even ran for the U.S. Senate. Now he appears to be walking his way into the office of mayor of Oakland. Reports say Brown grabbed 65 4/10% of the absentee ballots. The 3-time presidential candidate had been the undisputed frontrunner throughout this campaign. With absentee ballots counted, Brown is well on his way to succeed current Mayor Elihu Harris. Brown needed more than 50% of the vote to avoid a runoff, but Brown doesn't consider his early election night success a total victory. Brown said tonight that victory will come when the people of Oakland feel so safe in their own homes that they take the bars off the windows and the gates off the front doors. But again, it appears that Jerry Brown is back in politics in City Hall in Oakland. Lois, Dave, back to you.
I'm not sure he ever left politics, Tim. All right. And following all this for us is, well, a more humorous side, is our political cartoonist, John Kloss, tonight, who has just whipped up a political cartoon about Jerry Brown. John, explain it to us, will you, and give us a look.
Well, actually, Jerry Brown is something that someone who cartoonists miss very dearly, so we're glad he's back. Always a bad haircut and never smiles much, but here he's Governor Moonbeam, and it's a Mike Royko quip from Chicago Tribune a long time ago, but he's introducing Spock as his chief of staff. So.
I don't think he'd take kindly to your description as having a bad haircut. He doesn't seem to have much hair at all these days.
Yeah, what hair he has.
Yeah.
Right, but I think that it's good to have him back, and in no matter what form, I think.
You know, one of the interesting things is that political writers often don't get as much reaction to what they write as to what political cartoonists will put in a publication. What sort of reaction have you received over the years to your political cartoons?
Mixed. You can get it from both sides. I think political cartooning, editorial cartooning, they're just snowflakes in the big snowstorm of dialogue, so I think they have an appropriate role on the editorial page to try to get people to look inside the paper. So, and also that if people see the cartoon, if they're going to look more at the pictures and some of the feature stories, maybe they'll go back to the front page and say, maybe I've missed something.
Yeah, John, let us look at that last cartoon. I think we just saw, just for a second if we can, that head in the sand. This is on the various propositions here in California, John?
Oh, yes. Not just this year. I've gone in some old propositions here. There's a proliferation of propositions because our state government officials, we hire a lot of money, are having their heads in the sand. The theme for tonight is Decision 98, but maybe you can say this is indecision over decades now, and of course what we get is the propositions and all the ballot measures. It's what we deserve.
Graphically put. John Kloss, thanks. We'll check in with you a little bit later in the evening. See what else you have created for us.
Sketch you later.
Sketch you later, okay. Well, Leroy Green is retiring from the 6th District State Senate seat, and Deborah Ortiz is running for that seat, and that's where Tom Duhane is tonight. Tom?
That's right. It's another one of the open seats. This one, as you said, in the 6th. It's a sprawling district that goes all the way from Greenhaven all the way to Folsom across the northern part of Sacramento County. There are 2 Democrats and 3 Republicans running, and 1 Democrat is pulling way out of front. That is Deborah Ortiz. You must feel very good being out ahead, what, at least 4-1 now?
Yeah, the numbers look very good for the primary, and I'm happy with the numbers. It's an interesting campaign. It's twice the size of my assembly seat, so we never quite know how we're going to do here in the unincorporated county, but I'm real happy with the numbers thus far.
Now, we're going to assume that, yes, it's a strong lead. It's going to hold. You're going to cruise into November. What do you think that race will be like?
Well, it depends. I think the electorate is fairly optimistic. The economy is strong. It is a gubernatorial year. It depends on the strength of the top of the ticket, but I think overall, I'm feeling good about it. I think we're ready for that win in November.
What do you think your key issues will be? And when you consider this district, it's fairly evenly split, Republicans, Democrats. It's not even though Leroy Green has held this district for years and years, it's not an overwhelming Democratic district.
That's correct. This district, in some respects, is a microcosm of California. It's got the whole spectrum of very conservative to very liberal. It's a balanced district, but overall, it's a district that believes in government. It's a district that has a lot of state employees. We are the seat of state government. It's a fairly well-informed electorate, and it's a microcosm. It's not clear-cut partisan Dem. People are going to vote, I think, cross partisan lines. I think we're going to, convince a number of Republican voters that I have the experience, that I've addressed the, working class family issues that are essential to this district. I'm very optimistic, and it really is a district that can teach the rest of the state of California about politics. I'm real happy about it.
Also must be happy because you didn't have to spend a great deal of money in this primary. Your fundraising must have done you well, and you have a campaign chest to go into the fall.
Well, we did actually we never took this primary Democratic electorate for granted, and you never can. We spent a good amount of money, not as much, I think, as the Republicans on that side, but, we have worked hard to, remind the Democrats that live in the other part of the district that I don't currently represent and introduce myself to them. But certainly, November it's going to be, because it's a targeted race, because it's a district, one of 3 throughout the state that is targeted for a battleground between Republicans and Democrats. It'll be a very expensive race, and it worries me, the need to raise that kind of money. It'll be close to a $2 million campaign.
We've got time on your side. Deborah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman Deborah Ortiz, who is head and shoulders the leading Democrat in the 6th Senate District. She'll be running off for the Republican in November, and that's the latest from the Citrus Heights area. Back to you.
Could be the understatement of the night, saying she's pleased with those kind of numbers. Thank you, Tom. We want to say goodnight now to our viewers on Q58 who will be leaving us. Fraser is up next on Q58, but our live election coverage, Decision 98, continues here on Channel 3, and also for our viewers watching on C-SPAN and Prime Star.
Mike Lurie of our staff is watching the treasurer's race tonight, and he is with Sacramento area developer, well-known figure around town, Phil Angelides. Mike?
Lois, there is now a statewide candidate from Sacramento. His name is Phil Angelides. He is the Democratic nominee for state treasurer. First of all, congratulations, Phil, on your big victory tonight.
Well, thank you very much. It feels good.
You've got a lot of supporters here. You've got a lot of enthusiasm. What are some of the themes you hope to hit in the fall campaign?
I'm going to run on investing more of the state's portfolio here in California to create jobs for our people, better here than in Indonesia. And also, I want to fix up the schools in the state, and as state treasurer, I'll chair the California School Finance Authority. And what I want to do is finance the new schools and the fix-ups of those old, terrible schools, dilapidated schools, so that our kids have the schools they need. And those will be my themes: invest here and build our schools.
It looks like your likely opponent in the fall is going to be Kurt Pringle, who has a lot of name ID, obviously, in the state, being a former assemblyman. What strategy will you use to beat him in the fall, and how much money realistically will it take?
Well, it'll be a tough fight. He's an Orange County assemblyman. He's very conservative. He'll be a very tough opponent. But I believe people want to fix up their schools. I believe people want to build the economy. And I really think that the clear choice is a treasurer who's a business person who wants to finance schools, and Kurt Pringle, who has really been against most school finance measures.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. It should be an
you.
interesting campaign in the fall. A very happy Angelides campaign headquarters. As you can imagine, Phil Angelides goes on to become the nominee for Democratic candidate for state treasurer. I'm Mike Lurie reporting live from Angelides headquarters. Back to you now in the studio.
Thanks, Mike. And all the initiatives, propositions on the ballot tonight, save one, appear to be winning. Here's Sarah Gardner with the latest for us. Sarah?
Dave and Lois, we do have some final numbers in for you on some of the key propositions, with 13% of the precincts reporting. Let's begin with Proposition 219. Ballot measures has passed. Proposition 220, courts consolidation, has been approved. Proposition 221, the court discipline measure, has also been approved. Proposition Proposition 222 also has won by a wide margin. This measure would impose life sentences without parole on people convicted of second-degree murder of law enforcement officers. 223 school spending limits is currently passing, and a big win for Proposition 227, the measure that would virtually wipe out the state's 30-year-old system of bilingual education, won by more than a 2-to-1 margin. You can bet that a lawsuit, or at least the threat of a lawsuit, will surface sometime tomorrow. At this time, too close to call, Proposition 226, the union dues measure. And the only failing measure at this time is Proposition 224, the competitive bidding measure. David Lois, back to you.
All right, Sarah, thank you. And voter turnout today, of the people who were eligible to vote, it was estimated about 42% would finally be going to the polls. Of the people registered to vote, that was a different number. It was estimated that perhaps about 28% of the registered voters would be going to the polls today. But in some areas tonight, I believe earlier we heard in Sacramento County, that figure was even lower, lower than 25% apparently.
Bill Jones is the Secretary of State, joining us now live in our newsroom. What do you make of the turnout today?
Well, I think we're still going to be on track with what our prediction was, which was going to be about 42% of the registered voters. I know Mervyn Field had talked about the universe of total potential voters being about 21 million. He had said 28, 29%. But if our number is still accurate, it will be the largest turnout we've had in 16 years in a gubernatorial primary, and larger, we hope, than the 1994 election.
You chose to focus on that higher number as a way, I understand it, of inspiring people to vote.
Well, we have always used the registered voter number because that's the only universe that can participate in this election today at this time, because you had to register a month ago to be a candidate to vote in this election. So the universe, the whole number, is a broader, more statistical number, but it does not affect who can vote today, and we are accurate at that number, we believe, of around the 40 to 42%.
Well, if indeed accurate, and this is the best turnout in some 16 years, what do you suspect energized voters this time around?
I think there were a number of things. One, of course, the blanket or open primary. We have found good comments from the public. I think Californians like options, they like choices, and this has provided them. Also, the declined estates or independents have never had a chance to vote in a partisan primary before. They are 12.5% of the registered voters, and they participated, I think, this time for the first time. Absentee, aggressive program on the part of gubernatorial candidates, and finally, a very aggressive effort on our part to clean up the deadwood, people who have died or moved away off the voter rolls. Very important. We have done that, and I think that's worth 2 or 3 percentage points. All those items combined, I think, led to a little higher turnout this time. I think we've turned the corner. I think we're going to see even a higher turnout in November for the general election.
But the parties are still fighting this blanket primary,
yes,
aren't they?
That's right, and we won defending the public's right to have an open primary against all the political parties at the federal district court level. Now we're going on to the appellate court level, and the national Republican and Democrat parties have joined in against us on that effort. But we're confident we're going to win, just as we won the term limits fight for the people of California.
Well, it has worked in other states, Washington among them, right?
That's correct. Washington has not seen a big problem with the open primary, and our comments have been fairly positive around the state from people who have voted today.
Bill Jones, Secretary of State, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.
And Edie Lambert is covering that hotly contested debate. Doug Osee, Barbara Albee. You're at Doug Osee headquarters right now, Edie?
Hi, well, right now we are at Doug Osee's headquarters. His supporters are in a fantastic mood tonight. It, of course, does not hurt that he's ahead by a good 10% right now with the results that have come in. Mr. Osee, if you can talk about these results, pretty confident at this point.
Well, Edie, thank you. My dad is Mr. Osee, and he's here somewhere. I'm Doug. So.
The other Mr. Osee. All right, Doug.
We are very gratified with what's happened so far and hopeful that it'll continue. We'll stay here till the wee hours and keep our fingers crossed.
Now, a lot of people were expecting this race to be much closer. Why do you think you are this far ahead this early?
I expected this race to be very close. I think it still could be very close. We're not folding this tent until it's over for sure. I think people responded very positively to the message that we took out about government accountability, paying attention, trying to make a difference in your lives and with your families and your communities. And I got to tell you, it's very humbling to stand here tonight.
Many people saw the messages that you were putting, especially up on television, as negative messages and are wondering, well, if you take this through November, what kind of campaign will you run?
Our campaign will continue to be focused on issues that are important to people, like accountability for your actions, getting up and going to work, the promises you make, the results you deliver. We think that the positive message we bring, having to do with getting people together and trying to solve problems in a collaborative sense, whether it's water or flood control or infrastructure or education or tax simplification or what have you, we think people respond very positively to that. I mean, we have worked our tail off up and down this district. I think that's what's reflected here.
Okay, thank you very much again. We will watch the results along with you, and Doug Ossie said he's going to be watching this one until it is all over. Back to you.
Well, if he continues on the, if he appears to be if it continues throughout the evening that way. Thank you, Edie. It looks like he'll be facing Sandy Dunn, who appears to be winning the Democratic nomination for that congressional seat.
And now Governor Pete Wilson at Lundgren headquarters in Newport Beach.
I fully expect that he will lead a slate of great Republican candidates to victory, that they will have the kind of support that you have demonstrated for them here tonight, and that we will have a lot to cheer about on election night in November. And one of the very nice things about Dan Lundgren's candidacy is that it will be issue-driven, that we will be proud of his candidacy, not just of his values, which we share, but of the way he conducts himself in this campaign. We will never have to feel ashamed, as I am sure many Democrats have felt ashamed just in the last day, when someone reaches beyond demagoguery of class warfare to explicit race baiting. That is not just contemptible, it is beneath contempt. And yes, I am referring to the Democratic nominee. It is an unfortunate thing, to say the least, that there is an effort not simply to engage in character assassination, but to deliberately mislead Californians into thinking that other Californians bear some kind of racial hostility to them. That is not what a governor of California is supposed to do. We do not want that kind of false leadership in this state, and it is just one of the reasons that we should all get out and work even harder for Dan Lundgren. And these people who are on the platform behind me, and so many of you out there in the audience, you have not only my gratitude, I am, and it is mutual. You have not only my gratitude.
All right, we understand that Al Checky is about to make an appearance at his campaign headquarters. We're there live now. Let's watch and listen to the candidate who spent somewhere between $35 and $40 million here in California, about an estimated $44 per vote that he got tonight, and ended up, as you can see, getting just 21% of the vote, not winning one California county at last count. Here's Al Checky.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the people of California have spoken, and I endorse their decision. Lieutenant Governor Greg Davis and I have just spoken. He has my support, my endorsement, and I encourage all of you to work as hard for him as you did for me these many, many months. You know, I've had a very fortunate life as I think of where I started and many of the things that I've been able to accomplish. And for all of them, there was one common theme, which is that I had the help of a great many people. And one of the wonderful parts of this experience have been the many people that we met. And many of them are here today, and I want to thank them, especially Javier Becerra, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, the Speaker of the California Assembly, Antonio Villaraigosa, and Senators Jim Costa and John Vasconcellos. Councilman Nate Holden. There are so many other people to thank, and you all know who you are, but a special thanks to my family. You know, midway through this process, it became evident that Kathy was the best candidate in the family. But I want to thank Kathy and my children. We sat down a year ago and we made a decision to make an investment in our home state. And this was a Checky family investment. And I also want to thank them for supporting me in realizing my dream. "30 years ago, Bobby Kennedy ended his last campaign here in California. And he campaigned to create equal opportunity, to bring a diverse people together, and to awaken our people to invest in the future. You know, although we lost this race, we succeeded again in raising the need to address these critical issues. We can't have equal opportunity without equal access to quality education, to safe neighborhoods, to high-paying jobs. We can't bring our diverse people together if we continue to drive wedges among them. And no matter how good we feel right now, we cannot secure a strong future without investing in it. You know, lastly, we succeeded in making a special appeal to immigrant groups in this election. Particularly Latinos, and in this regard, I want to give a special thanks to my wife, Kathy. She's emerged as sort of a cross between Evita and Eleanor Roosevelt. You know, there were many moving moments as I traveled this state. I traveled for 18 months, spoke over 700 times. You'd think I'd have gotten better at it. I went to a charter school in San Diego, and the children there were from very poor families, so the school was able to provide them breakfast and lunch. But the teacher told me that towards the end of the month, the children would start to get listless because at the end of the month, the money ran out and there was no dinner at home. This is California, 1998. Then there was Cliff Doyle in Santa Clara, a young man who at the age of 13 had been struck by a car and had cerebral damage. And he was working in the Hope Rehabilitative Service Center, and he told me how much this center meant to him. The funding was threatened, and you saw the good that could be done for this young man. Then I'll never forget the young girl in Salinas. She wanted She wanted me to establish my credentials for this job. And she asked me, have you ever worked in the fields? Well, you know, maybe that should be something that every politician has to do, is work in the fields.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Al Chucky, in reasonably good spirits, considering he lost, and considering the fact that he spent about $35 million in his losing effort.
Well, he's got about $700 million more,
He'll
so
make it,
I guess he'll make it. Steve Swat joining us once again, our political expert tonight on the manifestations or the consequences or whatever of the open primary. Steve?
And the political experts will tell you tonight they still don't know exactly what it means or how it has been manifested. Of course, it is uncharted waters here in California. We've had a closed primary since 1909. Some other states, a few other states around the U.S. do, in fact, have an open or blanket primary, like the state of Washington, but nothing compares to California, of course. If you look at California, 47% of the registered voters in California are Democrats, 36% are Republicans, 17% are independents or others. If you add up all the Democratic votes now for the governor's race, the Democrats received 59% of all of the votes. They are therefore running 12% ahead of registration. But if you look at the Republican U.S. Senate race between Darrell Issa and Matt Fong, the Republicans are running 12% ahead of registration. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us that the voters are taking advantage of the new open primary. They are gravitating toward the very hot races. California voters are notorious ballot ticket splitters, and it seems to be manifested this evening. You know, Dan Lundgren at one point was worried about what appeared to be defections among Republicans toward his candidacy in mid-April, of course, before everything was galvanized. He only had the support of something like 40% of Republicans, and 30% of those Republicans indicated they were undecided or may even go elsewhere, and that's what prompted Dan Lundgren to take out some very early ads before the June primary, even though he did not have anything other than token opposition, but he did take out some ads to try to get that support back, because there's the feeling that once you are jilted in June and your candidate stays alive in November, those voters will never come back to you. It certainly helped Dan Lundgren, and again, the Republicans moved well toward him as the election came a little bit closer. Now, one other final point. One pre-election survey indicated that as many as 40% of the electorate might be prepared to switch and vote for individuals who are not in their party. 40% play a little mischief in someone else's primary. Of course, now in California that's legal, and for a lot it's a lot of fun.
It always was, even when it wasn't, I guess. All right, thanks, Steve.
It'll be grist for political analysts for quite some time to come. Let's check in with Kelly Brothers, who's with the Voices of California tonight. Kelly?
We're still talking about negative campaigning. We have to go to the phones because Suzanne Brooks of Sacramento, I believe you've been holding for a long time, Suzanne. We thank you. You're on now with the Voices of California. What's your comment? We lost Suzanne. Tell you what, let's go to Cindy. We had to cut you off when Dan Lundgren started speaking. I apologize for that. What's your comment on negative campaigning?
Basically, I just think it's gotten to the point to where you don't know who to trust anymore. Everybody seems to lie, so who do you vote for? Nobody. It's just not to the. It's to the point to where you just don't know who to trust. It's too many lies, and it hurts because people. If you don't feel like you trust anybody, why go vote? It's turned a lot of people off, and I think that's going to hurt in the long run. Not just the old generation, but the new generation. And people right now, especially the kids, want somebody they can trust. And if you hear all these lies and everybody's calling everybody else a liar, and then, you know, the kids are all going to say, why go?
All right, Larry, thank you very much. I apologize, Cindy. We cut you off again. Let's get Suzanne on, though. We just got her back on. Suzanne, what was your comment?
My comment was that the negative campaign advertising is reflected in the way people are treated in California more and more. I've seen this, that employees are smeared on their jobs and state jobs in much the same way. So I think this terrifies a lot of people in the state in terms of the way people are treated, and they respond to these ads in a very personal way.
So you see it as a kind of a general lack of civility in the state then, and not just with our political ads, Suzanne.
I see it that way indeed, and I see also a competition among those people who use negative ads in using buzzwords that many people, particularly in minority communities, see as buzzwords which are anti-minority. so that they compete with words like we're going to fight crime better, meaning to many people we're going to incarcerate more minorities. We're going to cut spending, meaning we're going to cut services to minorities. And so these are some of the issues that are not simply making people apathetic. There is a growing grassroots movement now to tell people who grassroots people want to vote for. And so we are now generating that throughout California and will be more active in the general election.
Well, we saw it in the interview. By the way, thank you, Suzanne, for holding so long. We saw it in the interview with Doug Osee as well, where one person's negative campaigning is another person's focus on accountability, I believe was his term on it. Cindy, your turn, and you're getting through this time no matter what. Go ahead. What is your comment?
Well, I think that we can see as a result of the polls that negative campaigning hasn't really gotten any of the candidates anywhere. And I think the question now is to ask why negative campaigning, or what prompts negative campaigning. And I think maybe it could be many times when people make negative connotations to other people is to point fingers because they have nothing positive to say about themselves or
no record to run on.
Right.
Jan, I know you have a comment as well. What's your comment tonight?
Well, I'd like to pick up on Cindy's point, and that is that candidates get a free ride when they run negative campaigns. They don't have to have a platform. They don't have to tell the electorate what they're standing for, what they're running for. And we've lost this year Vic Fazio, who's retiring after 20 years of public service, and the Congress, partially because of the negative campaigns that he had to bear over the last 3 terms. And it's a shame because he's a fine public servant as opposed to our lexicographer over here that defined a politician. I think Vic Fazio is truly a statesman, and he's going to be missed. And partially it's due to the negative campaigning.
Okay. One quick comment from you?
Yeah, negative campaigning, basically sensationalism and entertainment.
Exactly, and we respond
so it reach
to
a voter
it.
in 30 seconds, in other words?
It muddies the waters and muddies the issues.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. Andy and Martinez. Andy, you're on with the Voices of California tonight.
Well, I just want to say that, in my opinion, negative campaigning doesn't work because we went through and looked at the ballots and exactly listened to the ads and said, this guy's lying, or this person's lying, or on this issue, or and all those sorts of things. What I'd like to see is a change in the rules, maybe make it illegal to have negative ads on television, or let's say have ads that only talk about issues. What do you think of that?
Well, as we said, issues is a broad term, and we get into questions of semantics all the time in politics. Ted, what's your point here?
My point is that we're tabloidizing everything we do, and it's becoming lower and lower. We're less newsworthy, and we're more sensational. And I think that negative campaigning is just an aspect of what's happening to our national life. We're cheapening everything, and we're not leaving the old ethics and old virtues that we used to live by.
Earlier, you said it wasn't voter apathy, it was voter cynicism. You still believe that?
I still believe that, yes. I think that we have to clean up our act if we expect our kids to act better, more angelic.
Okay. Yes, sir?
Gets back to role model.
I think that when you see negative advertising, it's a pretty good indication of the moral intent of the people that are doing it in the first place. It gives you a pretty good idea of where they're coming from, their ethical outlook, and it's just a dead giveaway.
We already saw Dan Lundgren say tonight that he hoped that the campaign for governor anyway would be clean. Does anyone expect we will not see negative
Point right away.
He said it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and if he doesn't, then they also have people come out and say it for him. Governor Wilson came out and said something. Of course, that was about a comment yesterday.
I think it's important that tonight we've shown that despite our differences, we're in agreement that we're very against negative campaigning, and we want to see the candidates that are running for office debate the issues and hopefully come up with solutions. And as a result, we'll have a better process.
And I think even part of that, I mean, one spot I didn't understand personally was did you see the ICE ad with the outtakes? Did anyone get that?
Well, he was trying to show his human side, I think. I think he was trying to say that okay, I messed up sometimes, I'm human, but at the same time, he didn't stop.
Well, not only that, but you didn't know anything really about him.
Right, other than he couldn't be an actor.
Anyway, last comment. Yes, sir, Bill.
It depends on what you call negative, campaigning, because I do believe that a political member of Congress, the records of where they stand and their absenteeism or their how often they voted has a great bearing.
It's how they frame the issue. Yeah, speak on the record, but it's how they frame the issues, and I think it's up to the voters to take a look through the muddied water. It's up to the voters to pay attention to what's going on and read the issues before they vote.
All right, Voices of California, thank you very much yet again. We're going to come back and wrap it all up in less than half an hour and talk about some of the other issues going on tonight. Dave and Lois, back to you.
All right, Kelly Brothers with the Voices of California. The big story tonight is that the decision for governor here in California, it's Dan Lundgren versus Gray Davis, and the propositions, it's the bilingual matter that has won.
And we'll be checking with the live reporters in Southern California in just a moment.
Live from the KCRA Election Center, this is Decision 98 with Dave Walker and Lois Hart, the Channel 3 news crew stationed around the state, bringing you live the Voices of California, political experts Steve Swat and Kevin Riggs, and unique perspectives. Tonight, the issues, the decisions, and the results as Channel 3 reports Decision 98. Now, Dave Walker and Lois Hart.
What a night it's been for Gray Davis as we continue here our live continuing coverage of Decision 98. Gray Davis with a resounding victory for the Democratic nomination for governor. He'll be facing Dan Lundgren come November in the general election. And Kevin Riggs is with the Davis campaign in Los Angeles tonight. There you see the latest totals with 33% of the vote now in California. Kevin, what's the latest?
Well, I got to tell you, Dave, the Democrats are really fired up here in Los Angeles. We're expecting Al Checky to come out here into this ballroom momentarily to greet Gray Davis and to throw him his support in the fall campaign. But the Democrat, obviously, that we know is the nominee for the fall is Gray Davis, a man who has spent 23 years climbing the political ladder from chief of staff to Jerry Brown to a member of the state assembly to state controller to lieutenant governor. And now, of course, the Democratic nominee for the fall. He outpolled two much wealthier candidates and is now just one campaign away from the governorship.
This is truly an experience money can't buy.
Vastly outspent, but clearly not out-campaigned, Gray Davis thanked California voters for, in his words, opening their hearts and minds, defying the experts, and picking him as the Democratic nominee. Tonight, he called for an end of what he called 16 years of stagnation and an effort to fulfill California's destiny.
As governor, my top priority will be to fix the schools, and I believe in a high achievement, high expectation approach to learning.
I'm really excited by Gray's performance. I mean, I think that it shows really good results for the Democrats in the general election. This really bodes well for the Democrats.
What were voters saying when they voted for Gray Davis over two more wealthy candidates?
Well, people were saying that they didn't like the influence of money. They didn't like the influence of money just to come outright by the election.
And again, an overwhelming victory tonight for Democrat Gray Davis over two much wealthier candidates. In earlier remarks, he thanked Al Checky and Jane Harman and said he looked forward to their support. He also mentioned that he got a phone call tonight from President Clinton, who also offered his congratulations. Al Checky, or rather Gray Davis tonight, saying that there is a clear choice now between him and Dan Lundgren for the fall, saying that he supports the death penalty, he supports keeping society safe from drugs and crime, that he wants to help create jobs, and that above all, he wants to protect a woman's right to choose. So already, folks here looking forward to the fall campaign. And again, a lot of excitement here. The Democrats hoping they have a winner that can give them the governorship for the first time in 20 years. Once again, we're expecting Al Checky to come out here to the Gold Room here at the LA Biltmore shortly to formally congratulate Gray Davis, and we're just waiting for that to happen. Back to you in Sacramento for now.
One quick question, if you have time, if you could check with the Gray Davis campaign spokespeople or the campaign manager to see if they would respond to Dan Lundgren's challenge to begin a series of debates this month, if necessary. Maybe you can check with that and get back with us.
I will check on that.
All right, Kevin, thanks.
Now, earlier tonight, Republican Dan Lundgren spoke before the party faithful in Los Angeles. He thanked those who helped with the campaign and had some words for one of his competitors, Dennis Perone.
Thank you. I must tell you, this was a tough race tonight. I just finished talking to my opponent, Dennis Perone, in San Francisco, and I think he was trying to concede. But he said something to the words about party on dude, so I'm not sure exactly what that means.
And Laura Anthony is with the Checky campaign. Laura in Southern California. Laura?
Well, Dave, this has been an experience in controlled reality all night here at the Checky campaign, sort of symbolic, I think, of the political arena. Despite all the electronic wizardry they've had in this room all night, they never once showed the results of the governor's race, which means despite the early returns, the folks here did not learn that Al Checky officially had lost the race until the candidate himself came out and told them.
You know, although we lost this race, we succeeded again in raising the need to address these critical issues. We can't have equal opportunity without equal access to quality education, to safe neighborhoods, to high-paying jobs. We can't bring our diverse people together if we continue to drive wedges among them.
Now, Checky did not rule out the possibility, David Lois said, he might return to politics, although he did not specify exactly when or how he might do that. When it was all said and done, we understand he now will have spent more than $40 million on this campaign. Now, immediately following his speech, Al Checky went over to the other ballroom to meet up with Gray Davis, and we understand he's there now.
All right, Laura, we understand that we have Gray Davis live now. We don't know if he is with Al Checky, but here's Gray Davis once again.
But most importantly, I look forward to having his counsel, advice, and guidance as governor of this state so we can both make you very proud. Please welcome Al and Kathy Checky.
I want to congratulate Gray and Sharon. You know I'm new to this, but I think Kathy and I have learned that this is a team effort. I want to congratulate all of you, too, as supporters of Gray and as supporters of the Democratic Party. This has been a vigorous campaign, certainly been informative for me. And I want to congratulate Gray on his experience, his excellence. He's going to make a fabulous governor, and I'm going to do everything I can. And I would be honored to do whatever I can, Gray, to help you in that regard. Thank you all very much.
And Al Checky very graciously congratulating Gray Davis on his victory tonight and urging voters to continue to support the Democrats and in particular Gray Davis in his upcoming battle with Dan Lundgren for the governor of California.
Getting a little jump start on the old Unity breakfast.
There you go.
Joining us now is Edie Lambert. She is live at the headquarters for Doug Osee, who is running against Barbara Albee for the 3rd District Congress seat. Edie.
Well, Lois, Doug Osee supporters have been glued to the television tonight watching the results as they've come in, and they have really liked what they've been seeing tonight. Doug Osee more than 10% ahead of his closest competitor, that is Barbara Albee. They're very happy about that. This has been a hotly contested and fairly negative race. What do you make of these numbers?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Yeah, you've got a lot of people behind you there. What do you make of these numbers?
Edie, I am very gratified. I mean, we have worked hard this entire campaign, and it's humbling to stand here before my citizens and have this kind of support.
I asked you about a half hour ago how you were feeling. You said you're going to watch these until the last number is in. Are you still feeling that way?
Absolutely. We're taking, I mean, Let me tell you, I'm not counting this one until it's completely hatched.
Now, we have some people there near our studio, Voices of California. They were talking about negative campaigning and talking about your ads in particular. This was not what they wanted to see. What can we expect toward the November election?
We will be talking, as we have in the past, about a very positive aspect of holding people accountable for what they do. We're going to talk about water and flood control and education and tax simplification. We're going to continue to lay out the ideas we have about those things. Frankly, you can see from these numbers, at least till now, that voters are responding very positively to the ideas and discussions that I've had with them. I'm telling you, this is hard work, and we're going to stay at it. And if my opponent or opponents want to come out on the trail, you know, they're just going to have to come out here, because that's where I'm going to be.
Okay. We'll be watching these numbers as they come in with you. And the candidate who's emerging as the Democratic nominee is Sandy Dunn. We can tell you a little about her. We caught up with her at her campaign party in Citrus Heights, and she told us she spent less than 10% of what Doug Osee spent in the primary. She's a lawyer who specializes in water issues, and like Osee, she's a political newcomer. And many have said that the Republicans did some of her work for her by running a negative race. We asked her about that.
Most of the voters are really don't like that kind of sleazy tactics that have been going on, and with the Republican side, I think they're really interested in hearing what people are going to do for them, and that's what I intend to talk about when we go on to November.
And the way this race is shaping up, you will hear a lot more from Sandy Dunn and from Doug Osee as this race heads towards November, as one of the candidates tries to fill the seat that's been held by Vic Fazio now for 20 years. I'm Edie Lambert reporting live. Back to you.
And John, of course, has the endorsement of Vic Fazio.
Yeah, we should point out perhaps Doug Osee is being a little cautious tonight, even though he appears to have a sizable, if not a commanding lead, because you may recall in Vic Fazio's last election, Tim Lefevre, Lefevre jumped out to an early lead, but that ran on till the early morning hours when Vic Fazio finally won that election. So it's a long and winding district, basically conservative, although mainly registered predominantly Democrat. They tend to be a conservative district. So even though Doug Osee has that lead, he is playing it on the cautious side tonight. Now, another candidate with a very commanding lead tonight is the undersheriff for Sacramento County, that is Lou Blanes. At last count, he had about, well, he has 61% of the vote right now. Against Byrd, he is the police chief of Ileton, who gained fame, you might say, or infamy, because he issued so many gun licenses and said if elected sheriff of Sacramento County, he promised to issue at least 50,000 of them. And at any rate, he is losing handily.
And Blanes can win the race tonight if he gets 50% or slightly one more vote than 50% vote. Steve Swat, our political analyst, is with us once again. Steve, what have you got?
Well, to no one's surprise, this was the most expensive governor's race primary in California history. I'm sure you're not surprised at that. In fact, Al Checky himself has spent more than any other non-presidential candidate in U.S. history for a primary and a general election combined. He spent about half of what Ross Perot spent on his entire presidential campaign in 1992. And now, based on vote totals, current vote totals, and projections, and turnout projections, and estimates of campaign spending as of this hour, Gray Davis is spending, or has spent, $4.14 for every vote he received this evening, and Al Checky, $45.02. Now, 35.2% of the total statewide vote is going to Gray Davis, and only 12.2% of the total statewide vote is going to Al Checky. As a businessman concerned about the bottom line, Al Checky, I'm sure, was concerned about his return on investment. If he did this at Northwest Airlines, he'd probably have to fire himself. Checky's campaign, of course, was full of all sorts of contradictions. He bemoaned the failure of California to pass school bonds, but he didn't vote in the 1994 election when $2 billion were on the line in school bonds, and he didn't vote in 4 of the last 6 statewide elections. And when asked if he would send his children to public schools, he said, "Of course not. Why should I?" He used photos of himself with President Clinton, but he blasted Jane Harman for siding with Clinton on the most important vote of his presidency. And of course, he promised to run a positive campaign, but was relentless with his television ads attacking Harman and Davis. And so that's it from here so far. Very expensive, and I would say a very embarrassing defeat for zillionaire Al Checky.
On that last point, is that where the election turned? He actually had a lead at one point in this gubernatorial race for the Democratic nomination.
Everybody had a lead.
Well, I know, at one point. Until he started running those negative campaign ads, and then it all switched around, Steve.
What happened is that he ran the negative campaign ads to tear down Jane Harman, and it worked. But this was a three-way race, and Gray Davis was in there, and so the people who turned away from Jane Harman were equally disgusted with Al Checky, so they went right over to Gray Davis, and Gray Davis just floated to the top.
Right, Steve. We were thinking we might have Jerry Brown, but instead, let's check in with Lillian Kim. She is with Lou Blanis, who is running for sheriff and apparently winning. Lillian?
Lois, it's very loud here tonight. Folks here are celebrating, and figuring out who is going to get the most votes tonight really was a no-brainer. The big question was whether Lou Blanis was going to get more than 50% of the vote, and it appears he's on track of doing just that. Lou Blanis has more than 60% of the votes right now. These numbers are not surprising. Blanis is currently the #2 man in the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department. He had all the major endorsements: Sheriff Glenn Craig, District Attorney Jan Scully, and the Deputy Sheriff's Association. He also had the most money, almost $500,000. Tonight he's making his rounds, thanking all his supporters who came to this evening's event.
The Sheriff's Department is one of the best organizations in the state of California, if not the nation. We've got men and women out there who risk their lives every day to make our community safe. And I think that they really believe in the programs and the concept of the current administration, and they want to see those carried on. And I ran on that foundation. I ran on our record, the record that the Sheriff's Department has.
Dave and Lois, folks here are still celebrating, but the big question remains, in the end, will Lou Blanis receive more than 50% of the vote to avoid a run-up in November? Well, we'll see. Reporting live from Blanis headquarters in Natomas, I'm Lillian Kim. Back to you.
And if this sheriff's race in Sacramento County is a walkaway, it is a very tight one in Yuba County tonight. Mike Boyd is covering the race for us for sheriff from Marysville. Mike?
Dave, we have perhaps history in the making. Could it be the first woman sheriff elected in California? With more than half of the votes that we can see now in, Virginia Black leads the incumbent, Gary Tyndall, by a 53 to 47% margin. That's about 400 votes, Virginia, at this point. What do you have to say?
Well, that's pretty outstanding.
How do you feel about this?
Well, I feel really confident. I'm going to wait and see what happens when all the votes are counted, though.
What would be the changes you would make if you were to win tonight?
One of the first things I would want to do would be to get the Yuba County Sheriff's Department involved with the multi-agency task force that we know locally as NET 5.
On drugs?
Yes, it's a task force comprised of the 2 county sheriffs and the 2 police departments locally. And in 1994, the current sheriff pulled the Yuba County participation out of that, and since then we've had 1 and sometimes 2 officers to work narcotics for the entire county.
Could we get them to turn that down, please? And what else would you change should you win?
We need a multi-discipline interview team here for interviewing children who have been sexually abused to reduce the trauma to those children. Almost all law enforcement agencies throughout the nation are subscribing to the concept of a sexual abuse interview team to reduce trauma to those children, and we'll have one of those in place too. Additionally, I would like to get a cadet program going because I believe that law enforcement officers make good role models for our youth. So I would like to get a youth cadet program going once again in the Sheriff's Department.
How would it be to be the first woman sheriff ever elected in this state, California?
Well, I know that there's a lot being said about being the first woman sheriff, but I want to tell you and I want to tell everybody listening out there, the reason I got into this race is because I believe Yuba County deserves a good sheriff. And I want to be not known as just the first woman elected sheriff in the state of California, but I want to be known as one of the best sheriffs Yuba County has ever had.
Virginia, thank you. It's not over yet, but Virginia Black leads the incumbent, Gary Tyndall, by a 53 to 47% margin, only a few hundred votes. We shall wait and see how this night turns out. Live in Marysville, I'm Mike Boyd. Dave Lois, back to you.
Okay, Mike, well, that's one of the more interesting races around the state, but there are lots of others, and Tim Herrera has that for us. Tim?
Well, let's talk about two highly publicized races in California. First, let's talk about Jerry Brown. He spent 2 terms as California's governor. He ran for president 3 times. Now he appears to be walking into the office of the mayor of Oakland. Brown now has more than 62% of the early returns in that election. Tonight he told supporters it's a campaign of the people.
No professional consultants, one message to all the people kind of campaign, work for Oakland. Oaklanders first. And I do want to say one other thing. I don't want to call this exactly a victory. I want to call it a celebration, because victory isn't just about, some votes on a primary night in June. There's a long road to hoe here.
Brown only needed about 50% of the vote to avoid a November runoff. He didn't consider his early election night a success or a total success story. He told the crowd that the victory will come when the people of Oakland feel so safe that they can take the bars off their doors and windows. Another election we want to tell you about tonight is that voters do have a decision to make in Southern California whether to re-elect a congressman who has conviction. Unfortunately, in this case, it is the legal kind. He was a convict. His wife won't support him. Even the Republicans are ashamed of him. Yet Congressman Jay Kim of Southern California, who pled guilty to 3 misdemeanor counts of accepting $250,000 in illegal campaign contributions, is still running for re-election. But according to the returns right now, it doesn't look so good. Let's take a look at the numbers. With 8% of the vote in District 41, Kim trails Miller 54% to 27%. Kim didn't even go to the polls today. He cast his vote by absentee ballot. That's because he's effectively under house arrest, ordered to stay in Washington with a monitoring device strapped to his ankle. So he's sent out his staff to speak for him instead of campaigning for himself. The court says Kim violated the voters' trust by breaking campaign finance laws, but it turns out that he also broke a promise. In 1991, he told voters he would limit himself to 3 terms in office. It's now 1998, and he's in the middle of running for a 4th term. The House Ethics Committee is now investigating Kim's fundraising tactics, and Dave and Lois, tonight, voters are deciding his fate, and as we reported, his fate doesn't look good politically tonight. Back to you.
Yeah, I think, Tim, I even heard that his wife, or maybe it was his ex-wife, endorsed his opponent.
Well, that's a bad sign, isn't it?
That's rough, yeah.
That's a very rough sign. And anyway, it looks like it's going to be the last of Jay Kim, Congressman of Southern California, tonight. Kurt Pringle is the Republican nominee for state treasurer, and Phil Angelides, the Democratic nominee. Mike Lurie is with Mr. Angelides right now.
Well, it is very loud here, as you can imagine. There's a lot of celebration in the air as Phil Angelides has captured the Democratic nod for state treasurer. And Phil, let me ask you first of all, with voter turnout being a big issue because less than 50% of the voters turn out today for the Democrats to win in November, you're clearly going to have to mobilize the troops. How will you do that in the fall?
Well, I'm going to talk to the voters about what we need to do in this state. We need to fix up our schools. We need to repair the old ones, build the new ones. And as state treasurer and chairman of the School Finance Authority, I'm going to make it the hallmark of my campaign. We need to move the voters to build the future of the state. It's a hard task always in a state this big.
Looks like you'll be facing Kurt Pringle, who is not only well-financed but well-known, being a former Assembly Speaker. What's your strategy in a nutshell to beat him?
My strategy is to carry my ideas to the people, and I believe they contrast very well with his record, which is very Orange County, very right-wing, and I believe I'm in the mainstream of building and fixing up our schools and building the state's economy. It's a good message.
Okay, well, congratulations on your win tonight.
Thank
we'll watch
you.
your campaign in the fall.
Thank you.
A lot of celebration here at Angelides campaign headquarters. Now, as Sacramento has its own candidate for statewide office, as we wrap up here tonight. I'm Mike Lurie reporting live from Angelides campaign headquarters. Back to you now in the studio, Dave and Lois.
Okay, and a lot of folks are interested in what's happening with propositions, and I think we still have some actual races going on. So here's Sarah Gardner.
Believe it or not, Lois, we do. But let's begin with those that have been called. Proposition 219, our ballot measures, has passed. Proposition 220, courts consolidation, has been approved. Proposition 221, the court discipline measure, has also been approved. Proposition 222 also has won by a wide margin, and a big win for Proposition 227, the measure that would virtually wipe out bilingual programs in California schools, won by more than a 2-to-1 margin. 3 measures are failing. Proposition 223, the school spending limits. Proposition 224, the competitive bidding measure. Also failing, the costliest proposition on the ballot, Proposition 226, the union dues measure. which was once a lopsided favorite. Still passing is Proposition 225, the congressional term limits. Dave and Lois, that's it for us.
All right, and the wife of the State Insurance Commissioner, Chris Quackenbush, is campaigning on her own. She's running for the State Senate. Gina Garcia is with her tonight. Gina?
Well, that's right, Dave. I'm here at the Chris Quackenbush headquarters in Rio Linda, where, as you can hear, there is somewhat of a victory party at this point. We're going to go ahead and give you the latest numbers for the State Senate District 6 Republican ticket. Right now, the numbers stand at Quackenbush 46%, Michael McCollum 38%, and Richard Davis 16%. And joining me now live is, of course, Chris Quackenbush, who is going to tell us how she feels at this point right now. How are you feeling, Chris?
I'm feeling great. This has been a terrific race, and these are the people who made it happen.
So if the numbers stand at this point, it appears as though come November you will be facing off with Assemblywoman Deborah Ortiz. What do you plan on doing over the next couple of months to prepare for that?
Well, I plan to get lucky, and the harder we work, the luckier we get.
I understand that some of the key issues that you've been focusing on are, of course, education and flood control. Tell us what your focus is with those issues.
Well, education, of course, is number one, and everyone realizes how important it is that our children are educated well. They're going to lead us into the future, and we're not going to have a future unless we do a good job. And, of course, flood control, being the city most at risk in the entire nation, is totally unacceptable. So we have a lot to do in bringing people together to form a solution for those problems.
Okay, and although you garnered a lot of support, Republican support, it appears as though Ortiz is well ahead of you in the overall numbers. Tell me what you're going to do in preparation for this general election.
Well, I think the rest of the public needs to know that we have a positive message, and we haven't reached out to them well enough yet. And that will be our intention in the fall, is to make sure that everyone understands our message of hope and opportunity.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us tonight. That is the latest here. Reporting live from Rio Linda, I'm Gina Garcia. Back to you.
And thank you, Gina. And now back to Los Angeles and Kevin Riggs, our political correspondent with Gray Davis.
Well, there's been a lot of excitement here tonight at the Biltmore, and the crowd is dwindling, but the excitement is still with us here tonight, Dave and Lois. The Democrats saying they truly believe they have a winner that may actually regain the governorship for the Democrats for the first time in 16 years. Gray Davis tonight approached this crowd not more than a half hour ago, joined by Al Checky. Of course, he was vastly outspent by Al Checky, and Checky said that he would actually support Gray Davis as he tries to campaign in the fall for the governorship. But earlier tonight, Gray Davis addressed his supporters, thanking them this way.
My friends, this is truly an experience money can't buy. Let me say to the people of California, on this, the first open primary in our history, the name open primary is really fitting, because you've opened your hearts and opened your minds to me, and I will be eternally grateful.
As you can see, Gray Davis tonight expressing appreciation to his supporters, and again thanking Al Checky and Jane Harmon for their support. Also mentioning tonight that he had gotten a phone call from President Clinton offering his congratulations and his support for the night. As for his campaign priorities, Gray Davis told the crowd here tonight he supports the death penalty. He will work to help stimulate the economy and create more jobs, and he says that he will support a woman's right to choose. He says he is looking forward to a vigorous and clean campaign in the fall with Republican Dan Lundgren.
Kevin Riggs at the Davis headquarters in Los Angeles. Speaking of the fall and that campaign between Gray Davis and Dan Lundgren, classic matchup, conservative, liberal, Democrat. Here's Steve Swat.
Well, the big question, of course, now is will the Republicans come home during the fall, during the November matchup? A lot of Republicans, quite obviously, moved over to the very hot race in terms of the governor's race and voted for Democrats. But as I mentioned earlier, partisanship tends to re-exert itself the closer we get to a campaign and the closer we get to an election. The Republicans come home and the Democrats tend to rally behind their own candidate. In California, there are more Democrats than Republicans, but many tend to be conservative. So I would have to say that this race starts off the day after Election Day, primary Election Day in June, as a toss-up, with both candidates fighting for perhaps 15% of the total vote, the independent middle vote that is up for grabs. Now, looking ahead to the general election matchup, lieutenant governorship used to be a ticket to the top, but not anymore. Here you see four lieutenant governors who became governor in California during the 19th century. Gray Davis is trying to become the first lieutenant governor in 45 years to become governor. Goodwin Knight in 1953 acceded to the top when Earl Warren went to the Supreme Court. Frank Merriam became governor when Sonny Jim Rolfe died, and C.C. Young was the last lieutenant governor actually elected governor, and that was in 1926, or 72 years ago. Now, in terms of the Attorney General, in recent years, as crime has become a more important statewide issue, being Attorney General has been a better stepping stone to the Capitol's corner office. Violent crime is at a 30-year low in Los Angeles. Of course, you'd never know it watching LA TV News and the chopper freeway chases, but if voters feel safer, they may feel more inclined to support Gray Davis. So, is it better to be Attorney General or better to be Lieutenant Governor? In more recent history in California, Attorney General is a better stepping stone.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. And we want to rejoin Tom Duhane, who is following the State Senate District 6 race, which, of course, is the seat that Leroy Green is retiring from. He's with Deborah Ortiz in Citrus Heights. Tom?
That's right. This is the River Rock Cafe in Citrus Heights. This is the headquarters for their party tonight, and it is a pretty happy party as Democrat Deborah Ortiz is leading, looking to make a very quick jump to the State Senate after just 2 years in the Assembly.
Assemblywoman Deborah Ortiz is sweeping to a primary victory tonight by a margin of nearly 4-1 over her Democratic opponent, Joan Berry. Already, she's anticipating a tough race.
I think it'll be very high visibility. There will be a lot of very probably defining issues. If it's Ms. Quackenbush I'm running against, you know, I think there'll be some real fine distinctions. If it's Mr. McCollum, I think there'll be some real clear-cut distinctions. But it'll be expensive. It'll be very high profile. It'll be, I hope I'm wrong, but I think it'll be very contentious.
In Rancho Cordova tonight, it's all smiles at the Anthony Pichetti headquarters. The SMUD director has jumped in front of 8 other Republicans, hoping to replace Assemblyman Larry Bowler. Pichetti's main issue is educational reform.
Streamline the construction process so that we can get more schools online quicker, improve this renovation of schools, improve that process, hold teachers, school districts more accountable for the grades, and work closer with the school districts that are a part of this assembly district.
By the way, both Pichetti and Ortiz tell me they expect to have very tough races in November, especially Deborah Ortiz out here in the suburbs, who says that she thinks that the balance of power is so tight in the state assembly that the Republicans will target this district. They'll put a lot of money into the Quackenbush campaign. She expects it to be tough, and she also said she expects it to be divisive. Although she hopes it won't go that direction, she'll be prepared. Back to you.
Tom Duhane at the district headquarters in Citrus Heights tonight, and now we're going to check in with Alicia Malady in Manhattan Beach with the Jane Harmon headquarters. Alicia?
Hi, Dave. The Jane Harmon watch party ended shortly after it began. Harmon knew coming into today's election she would not win, and tonight she graciously accepted defeat. Jane Harmon conceded the race for the Democratic nomination less than 2 hours after the polls closed, flanked by her family, including her CEO husband, who financed much of the campaign. Harmon spoke about her failure to capture widespread voter support.
Winning is more fun, but losing with honor ain't bad.
The Congresswoman who gave up her 36th district seat to run for governor stopped short of blaming rival Al Checky for her loss and said she could not overcome the negative ad campaign against her.
What hurt was being attacked with $6 million of false ads, and hopefully we can reform the system so that that becomes less available to people because less money can be spent.
Harman won't say what political plans, if any, she has for the future, but says California voters haven't seen the last of her. The Congresswoman plans to attend a Democratic unity breakfast tomorrow morning to throw her support behind Gray Davis, and then she's off to Washington tomorrow as Congress begins to take up, of all things, campaign finance reform. Dave and Lois, back to you.
Of all things. You know, thank you, Alicia. How many candidates do you know who have had their face pierced 20 times?
Not too many. You know, that's one of the things about political candidates. They do tend to look the same, except for one candidate who stood out from the crowd. Here's more on that from Tim Herrera.
She certainly is standing out, Dave. Rainey Blue Cloud Greensfelder is the daughter of Vietnam War protesters. She doesn't look like any other candidate who's been campaigning in Nevada City, but she has been making an impression in the foothills.
She's just a new person on the block that looks a little different and has a few different ideas.
We're all kind of amused by it, I think. It's unusual.
We are in the future.
18-year-old punk rocker whose face is pierced 21 times, but this young candidate with combat boots and waist-length purple hair wants voters to know that she is a serious candidate. The biggest issue for her, a measure that would impose a $100 fine on anyone who obstructs the sidewalks and refuses to move. She calls it an attack on teens. Greensfelder says a few people have told her outright that they won't vote for her because of her unusual appearance.
I think it's very sad, and you know, I have to realize it's not me, it's their own fear and their own ignorance, and I kind of feel sorry for people like that who are so close-minded.
Greensfelder has raised more than $2,000 for her campaign. She says she finds herself now attending meetings on subjects like sewage treatment, and she says it's starting to become interesting to her. Right now, she is tied for third place out of 5 candidates with 18% of the votes. Dave and Lois, the top 2 vote getters there, get in, so there's still a chance for her.
Okay, thanks very much, Tim.
And I just want to point out a couple of other interesting races here in California. Robert Dornan, remember him, B1 Bob as he is known, lost to Loretta Sanchez, and then in a hotly contested race, he had the vote recounted, claimed that there were irregularities. Well, anyway, they finally awarded it to Loretta Sanchez. He ran again. He defeated his 2 Republican opponents tonight for the Republican nomination, so we have a rematch. It's Bob Dornan, Bullet Bob, B1 Bob Dornan versus Loretta Sanchez once again.
Another key congressional race is the one being waged between Doug Ossie and Barbara Albee for the Republican nomination, and Edie Lambert is at Doug Ossie headquarters.
Right now, if you take a look around, you can see the crowd is beginning to thin out here at Doug Ossie's headquarters. Many of his supporters have already gone home, and they have assumed that when they wake up in the morning, they will hear that he has secured the Republican nomination. In fact, we have learned that he is just a couple minutes away now from actually accepting the nomination. He's about 12% ahead of his opponent. His closest opponent is Barbara Albee. Now, he had been asked many times about this being a negative campaign, and he said come November, he expects to run a campaign that focuses more on the issues. Earlier tonight, we spoke with Barbara Albee at her campaign headquarters. At that point, the results were showing that she was clearly falling behind.
I'm never optimistic on election night. I wasn't in 96, it wasn't in 94, and I'm not in 98, so that isn't a measure of anything.
What will you do after this race if you don't go on to the November election?
I'll go back and serve in the Assembly and continue to represent the people of the 5th, and who knows what's beyond that.
Back here live at Doug Ossie's campaign headquarters, I understand you have an announcement for all of your supporters.
Well, Edie, it's clear to me looking at the numbers from the north and Red Bluff to the south here in Rio Vista and Yolo County, it's my opinion that I have prevailed. I want to express my appreciation for the level of support we've had. This race is now narrowed to 2 people. It's Doug Ossie and Sandy Dunn. I intend to continue the pace that I've set for the past 3 or 4 months, providing the leadership and the discussion of ideas up and down this great 3rd district, from water to education to infrastructure to tax simplification. It's time to move on. And it's now Sandy and I, and you know, we're going to be on the campaign trail, and we'd welcome Sandy out there for the political debate that comes forth, and hopefully the voters of the 3rd Congressional District will continue to find our message positive.
I see your family's coming to join you by your side. What do you make? Oh, there we go. That says it all. I just have to wonder, what you make of this moment. You have spent over $1 million. You essentially quit your job to run full-time for this campaign. This is your first run, and here you've got the nomination.
Well, I won't say I'm speechless, but I'm close. I'll tell you, I had an interesting experience today. It kind of puts this all to perspective. Young man, friend of mine, is in the hospital with leukemia, and he went in yesterday with a relapse. And I mean, you juxtapose that against what we're trying to do out here, and you kind of wonder which is important. Both are, and I got to tell you, if I could find a way to bring that young man out of here, I'd give this up in a minute, just in a flash.
So you've had this all put in perspective for you recently.
This is a humbling experience, and it just, I don't think we're ever very far away from being reminded what really matters around here. So.
Does an experience like that change the candidate you will be from here on out?
What got me here is who I am. I'm going to remain who I am, and the message that we're going to bring is going to remain the same positive, upbeat thing about how we can get together and solve our problems. And I got to tell you, in the back of my mind, I'm going to be thinking about Brian Moore down there in Sutter General and his fight. And I'm going to stay on the trail here and continue to struggle and fight as hard as I can for the ideas I've been talking about. It's the least I can do for the just the out-and-out honor that the people of the 3rd District have given me. Okay. And it's the least, I mean, if Brian can fight for his life down there, then I can fight for my ideas out here.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, and congratulations to you both. Again, toward November, the way the race is shaping up, you will see a lot more of both Doug Osee and the Democrat Sandy Dunn in this race. I'm Edie Lambert reporting live. Back to you.
All right, and Roy Stearns is in Newport Beach tonight at GOP headquarters. And you have the latest developments in the Fong ISA race, I understand, Roy.
Well, the biggest thing to talk about here tonight is what we don't know yet, and that's the very thing you're mentioning, the Fong ISA race. Matt Fong and Darrell Issa coming up in this race. A week ago, we were 10 to 12 points apart, Issa leading in the polls. In the last week, that changed to a dead-even race and remains so even at this hour. In fact, let me jump off this podium and talk to somebody who happens to know Matt Fong pretty well. This is Matt Fong Jr. The latest we've seen, Matt, is that Dad has 46, Darrell Issa has 40, with 54% of the vote in. What's Dad saying about that?
He still wants to make sure everything's very close right now. So I'm wishing the best for both of them. I hope my dad wins.
Does he think it's close enough now or far enough apart yet now to maybe call this race and say he's got it?
I think it's still pretty close. Darrell Issa has a lot of commercials out, so he's pretty well known to the public right now. So.
Okay. Well, what are you thinking of your dad right now?
I think he's in very good shape. He still can't call anything right now.
Okay. What's really going to be the tough one, if he pulls this out tonight, he's got to do this in November against a very, very strong candidate, Barbara Boxer. Can he do that?
Oh, he can. I'm 100 right behind him, 100%.
Okay, all right. Like father, like son here, huh? Matt Fong Jr., thanks very much for stopping by with us. Okay, well, let me get back up here on the box and show you what's going on then in the rest of the room. The party is still going on, and what we're waiting for is Matt Fong Sr. to come down here and talk to us about what's really going to happen. But the latest numbers we have are with 54% of the vote in. Matt Fong Sr. has 46, and Darrell Issa has 40. That's a 6 percentage point spread. That's pretty good right now, but it's still not good enough to really win this race. It wasn't long ago that it was only 1 or 2%. And I stopped talking there for a minute because I want to just listen and see if Matt Fong is going to come down. And then we'll have Matt Fong, so please stay tuned. Okay, Matt Fong is coming up in a little bit. That's the chairman of the Republican Party that was up there on the stand behind me. He's been orchestrating things, and it sounds like Matt Fong is getting ready to come down. So as soon as that happens, we'll get back to you, and you can get back to us. Back to Sacramento.
All right, Roy. Well, that was the race, the Fong ISA race.
And we want to thank KCRA TV in Sacramento for letting us simulcast their coverage of the California primary results tonight. Now we'll take a look at what's coming up next. We'll show you a discussion